the whole idea behind this presentation is that career coaching should be a primary treatment for folks who are seeking mental health treatment, and they should be screened for finding if they feel like they're trapped in their job and are unhappy because of it. Most therapists will, work on the problem. They will, maybe some of them eventually refer to a career coach, but many of them are not aware that some of them we exist, some of them that this can be an underlying cause. So that's my argument. What we're going to do today, first, who the hell am I? Good question. My name is Ella O'Flaherty. I spent nearly 20 years as a practicing attorney litigating. Now I focus on ADHD coaching. Of course, there's a career component to that as well. But I really have a strong attachment to this topic, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But first, let's talk about our goals. So our goals are to talk about this feeling of being locked in and how it relates to mental illness. We're going to talk about what governments and employer responses have typically been up until this point. We're going to talk about how people can get mental health support around this issue. We are going to talk about our own coaching support and how we can try to make this a clearer connection. And then I'm saving about 15-20 minutes at the end because you guys have really knocked my socks off in the last 2 days, and I know that you have loads of experience and smarts. So I want to brainstorm with you all about what we should do moving forward, and maybe some ideas of how we can make this connection more strongly. So here's my story. I will make it quick. So as I said, I was a lawyer for almost 20 years. I went to law school, as did pretty much everyone else in my family, and then I sat down at my desk on my first day and I thought, oh, I hate sitting at desks, like hate it. And I also don't like ever being alone, and I hate reading dense text. So as I sat with my 200-page brief in front of me, all alone in my office, I thought, oh, mistakes were made. And yet, I had made that mistake and bought into it, and I thought, well, there's no going back now, so cue the next 20 years. Until I myself went to a career coach and realized who was referred. I was referred there by my own therapist, thank God. And that's how I ended up here, basically because I single white femaled her and said, God, your job sounds fun, I'm gonna do that. And so I'm wondering if this might sound familiar for any of you or for your clients, and I'm guessing it does.
I see a lot of lawyers that I think go into the career, they think they're gonna help people, and that's not what they end up doing.
Yeah.
They all tell me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I also am extremely conflict avoidant, and I litigate it, so it's there's a lot going on there. But so let's talk a little bit about the research. So research out of Sweden that started about 4 years ago has been showing that folks who feel locked in, meaning their occupation is not suitable to them, like me, hi, being a lawyer, or their workplace, like from what I hear pretty much everyone at Amazon, no offense, that these are significantly correlated, not causation, but correlated to having depression and anxiety. And so this is an interesting study that was done by the Behavioral Health and Policy Association. And basically what this shows is they looked at the physical effects of being unhappy in your job and the mental health effects. They found the mental health impact was about twice as strong as the physical impact. And this right here, and oh yeah, I have a laser pointer. This right here is the health impact of secondhand smoke. And you can see that there's a significantly larger impact when people have work, family conflict, high job demands, unemployment, of course, low organizational justice. So you can see that there's a tremendous effect that we're seeing here. So it strikes me that this would probably be something that, you know, governments, employers would want to do something about, ideally. So here's the deal. I'm going to tell you some statistics from this research, and we all know statistics are to be trusted. They found that in these two groups, 18 to 35-year-olds and 45 to 54-year-olds, that feeling locked in or doubly locked in increased the odds of someone having depression and anxiety by this much, which is not a small amount. They didn't say why these two groups. Now, I am making this up, but my guess, and I would love to hear yours, is folks who are 18 to 35 just entering the job market and don't feel like they have enough experience to move on to something else that they want to do. And then also folks who are 45 to 54, right? They are trying to pay for kids and college and retirement. Again, feeling trapped in a salary perhaps, or an occupation that does not, suit them, but golden handcuffs. So. This is CDC guidance on this issue. I love this, right? The government, hopefully, are gonna, and I say this having worked for the government for a really long time, but hopefully they're here to help us. We're from the government. Let me just zoom in here real quickly. These are the guidelines that they're giving folks. What they're saying is make mental health assessment tools available, offer insurance, which I feel like that's like trying to get credit for shit you're supposed to do, but okay. Giving materials, brochures, having access to EAP programs, like great. Dedicated, quiet spaces to meditate. But the interesting thing about this, and same with the European Union, this is from their health authority, saying the kinds of things that folks should do to try to help workers who are having mental illness. And my absolute favorite part, it involves senior management, a steering group, so you know things are serious, and external experts at the top. At the bottom here, again with that steering group, senior management. Nowhere in this is employees or staff, which is a little concerning since they're the ones who are actually being impacted. So the basic reaction that we're getting from corporations and from government sources is make people aware, do some assessments, see if your people are a little depressed, a little anxious, provide an EAP so they can go get therapeutic help. And there's a real strong emphasis on how this impacts productivity. Huge emphasis. It's almost like that's what they care about, not the people. So what's the message that they're sending along here? The message that they're sending is that the employee is the problem. There's something wrong with you. You need to fix it. We'll give you some resources, but do that. It's also your responsibility. So again, we're gonna assess you, say you seem a little down in the dumps, fix that. And finally, just suck it up. Productivity, right? Let's fix you so you can continue to be our cog. Now, what can employers do? So this is from the American Psychiatric Association, which is a little farther down the road, and they're saying that things like prevention, they don't go super deep into prevention and some of the ideas of how you can do this, but okay, I like prevention before people are super depressed and anxious. That sounds good, right? Identification and intervention, similar to government and employers, trying to assessing folks, maybe letting them, again, go see the EAP, or because this is the APA, maybe letting them go see private psychiatrists and preferably paying for that. And then individual support. And this is where you have managers trying to support people, where you have peer support groups, that sort of a thing. So okay, this is getting us a little farther. I like it. What should they do, in my opinion? So here's the thing. First off, the culture. People who are unhappy in their workplace are generally unhappy because of a cultural fit. Of course, there are a million other reasons, but when it comes to the workplace, that's what they're really experiencing. So asking yourself as the organization, is our culture kind of awful? A little toxic. And being open to the ideas of what employees and staff, what changes they need, and how to make it more comfortable for people and more supportive. The second one is the demands of the job. So people are feeling very overwhelmed. You saw the #1 impact on mental health was when there is a conflict between work and family. So having too high demands that people, there's a lot of talk about work-life balance, but having been an attorney, That doesn't always happen, as I'm sure many of you know. Then having control over one's job. There's also significant studies that show, there's one out of Stanford showing that folks who feel like they don't have any control over, the final project that they're working on, or autonomy or anything like that, they are generally much less happy in the workplace. So having some level of control, ideally a pretty good amount of it, over your work. Then talent to task. So this is interesting, right? If you think about back in the day, in the 60s, people are thinking about starting in the mailroom, working their way up. Maybe they'll end up being like the CEO of UPS, which I believe really happened. But not so much now, right? So if you are hired in the marketing department, like, you are marketing. And if it turns out you hate marketing, you're marketing. Instead of saying you're a smart and skilled person who can do lots of things that aren't marketing because you hate that. And being open to that feedback and open to trying to move people to jobs that they will enjoy more. And finally, mobility. This is really interesting, and I mean physical geographic mobility. So here's a fun fact. In LA in the 1960s, 20% of the residents were born in California, meaning that they, kind of like me, I live in my hometown. In 2010, that number had gone up to 70%. So there is far less mobility among the workforce now, and less opportunity for jobs that are farther away. Now, I'm kind of hoping that the pandemic will help out with this, with remote work and that sort of a thing. But realizing some of these exacerbating situations. So what can therapists do? Recognition. Recognizing that an underlying cause of depression and anxiety can be your terrible job, which we all work with people in their careers all the time. And to me, this sounds like, yeah, we all know this, right? So let's do a quick exercise. I was raised by hippies, so just go with it, okay? So I'm gonna say a statement, and I'm going to do a hand motion, snapping, rubbing your hands, these sorts of things. And I'm going to point to your part of the room. And as I do it, if you say yes, if you have experienced this, please do the hand motion. So first of all, this is our first one. So anybody who has talked to a client who felt like they were trapped in a workplace that didn't suit? Okay. We're going to start over here with you guys. You ready? Anybody who has talked to a client who really, keep doing it. Keep doing it. I forgot that important part. Thank you. Anybody who's ever talked to a client who felt like they were trapped in their occupation that they just really, really didn't like? And that's me. Trapped in an occupation? Trapped in an occupation? Okay. Anybody who has worked with someone who started showing signs of depression that you were pretty sure, keep stepping, were related to their feeling trapped. Go like this. Okay. Now, keep going. You or anyone you've met or any client who has super hated their job and constantly bitched about it and it was affecting their life. Stamp your feet, stamp your feet, stamp your feet. And my friends, we have just made the most depressing rainstorm on earth. But it proves the point, right? Like, yeah, obviously there's this connection. So helping therapists to recognize this as a first line and ideally screen for it in intake is really critically important for successful treatment. The second part of, I really kind of scooped myself there, screening for it on intake, critical, right? Then the third one, establishing coaching referral networks. So many of us in our code of ethics, we're required to have strong networks where we can refer folks. However, for therapists, they do not have a similar requirement for career coaches or anything along those lines. And my argument is they should. And one of the things I want to brainstorm with you all about is how are we going to make this happen? Make them aware of us, make them think of screening as a first line of defense and treatment, and having us as strong referral networks. And for anyone who's wearing a white lanyard, it's also kind of good for business, but that is not my main point. So having these referrals is incredibly important. So this is a screening tool that I came up with, and it has a fun little acronym. Again, I worked in the government for a long time. I can't help myself. So, QMAP. The first question is, do you feel comfortable in your organization's culture? Second question, do you feel you have the ability to move up within your organization? Do you enjoy the work you're doing? Do you feel like you could move to another geographical location or another organization if you wanted to? What action have you taken to try to change your job, your career, your organization? And finally, what would you need to do in order to be able to pivot? And do you think you could easily do that? If someone had asked me these questions when I first entered therapy, I would have been like, nope, 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 nope. And I think a lot of our clients would say the same. Now, ideally, what would happen is you'd be screening folks, and then the therapist would be like, oh God, this job sucks. And they would say, all of you, I really need you because my client is being crushed by their job. So let's work on this primary source of depression and anxiety while we continue to work in therapy. And this would really help combine our powers, right? So what I am tasking you guys with, we're gonna brainstorm, I'm tasking you to go out in your communities and reach out to therapists and make them aware of this connection and that we exist and that we can really significantly help and improve their patients' lives. Now, for someone who is depressed and anxious, we will not be taking the place of therapists, obviously. However, we can remove one of the underlying causes for some people. We also want to let them know what coaching is and how we can work together. I have a very strong therapy referral network and some psychiatrists. Oftentimes, clients will want us to work together. So we will meet weekly and talk about their progress. We'll make sure that we're, that our work has synergy and that we're moving the same direction. It's incredibly helpful. So by working through this with his therapist and thinking, what are some strategies we can use both in therapy and in coaching so that we can try to get him to a place of, I'm not gonna say yes, but I'm gonna say like a skeptical maybe, would be a huge improvement. So talking about these benefits that, we give hope and we give practical ways for folks to move forward. And these practical tools are really critical because if you think about it, most therapists do not want to play in this sandbox. And as I said, I'm an ADHD coach, that's my focus. And so for my clients, for instance, they will get diagnosed by a psychiatrist who gives them meds. They will have a therapist who will talk about what happened in their past and all this good stuff. But I'm like, you guys, we have got to set a timer. We have got to, all these different tools that are very, very practical. And most therapists, again, don't want to be doing this kind of work. And they're more than happy to be like, you go do that. So how can coaches help? That is not the right picture. There we go. Coaches can help with this feeling of helplessness. So people, especially I have found, and I'm betting a lot of you have, folks who have been trapped in a terrible job for 20 years feel so hopeless, like they're just stuck there and there's nothing else they could possibly do. We can also help with creative thinking. Again, when you're in that box and it feels so, stifling, people have a lot of trouble with thinking, as you know, creatively about their career path. And then finally, prestige pressure, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, and I don't think gets enough attention. Side note, just want to check my privilege here, right? So someone who is, for instance, an attorney making a good salary, has savings, all that good stuff, and a good, support network, someone else who has health insurance who I can glom onto, really different position than some other clients. And I absolutely recognize that. And being able to make this kind of a pivot in many cases is a real privilege. So I am adding that grain of salt and very big caveat for all of us to remember. But this is a little hope to give your clients. So this was done by the OECD, which does great reports if you're familiar with them. And this shows, this vertical axis is the change in salary for people who have either done an interstate move or an industry change. And you can see both for the blue line is interstate move, the green is industry change, but for the Great Recession, which I mean, like, it was called that for a reason. Generally, people who have made these kinds of changes have seen an increase in salary. Now, your mileage will vary, but sort of as an overall information, this is